Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Friday's Business Before Hours to the 2022 Candidate Forum. My name is Yvonne Sepulveda, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the President CEO for the Marysville Tulalip Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for being here. If I'd like to introduce all our elected officials, if you can please wave as I say your names, if we can hold applause till the very end. We have Mayor John Nearing, Steve Mueller, Mark James, Peter Condilius. I did good, Peter. If we can give them all a round of applause there for Marysville City Council. Snohomish County elected officials, today we have Nate Nearing, Sid Logan, and Sam Lowe. If we can give them all a round of applause. And then we have with us June Robinson and Russell Joe from Issaquah. If we can give them a round of applause. And then if we, board members of the Marysville Tulalip Chamber of Commerce, if you can please wave, and again, please hold your applause. We have Tony Matthews, Peter Rudolph, Tracy Goldsby, Renee James, Todd Fallman, Felicia Kreider, Kevin Daniels, and Connie Meny. If we can give them a round of applause. Now I'd like to introduce our sponsor for this morning. If I can have Crystal and Charles from Ace Handyman from Puget Sound. If you can help me welcome them to the stage. You want to point that way, and okay. It just takes a minute to load.
Okay.
I don't know. There he goes. Good.
Good morning. It's good to see you all. No, I don't think I'm the coolest guy up here. So, word of advice. If you ever decide to go snow skiing and you forget your sunglasses, get a pair. When I was young, I went snow skiing on a bright sunny day and forgot my sunglasses, and so consequently, it was like looking at the sun. So now bright lights are very painful. So I'm going to wear my sunglasses. I talked to you guys this morning. Thank you for joining us. And get this started here. Well, I don't know if my PowerPoint's going to be up there this morning, but I'm with Ace Handyman Services. We're locally owned. We do a wide variety of things for you in your home. We've been open a little over 2 years now. And we are part of the Ace Hardware family. So we offer a lot of the same values and ethics that Ace Hardware has, and that's one of the reasons we got into this industry. We found that there is, in the handyman side of the industry, there can be a lot of, how can I say this nicely, people that aren't real ethical and take advantage of people. So we stand for ethical and honest work. Now we'll see if we can get this going here. Okay. So obviously, you guys can see my PowerPoint, but we're throwing it a little off here. That's part of our crew. Not all our guys not all heroes wear capes. In fact, Carpenter Man is here today, so if you guys want to get some autographs, Carpenter Man, raise your hand. So how we're different is we listen to our customers. And a prime example of that is we had a customer reach out to us recently that their neighbor hired a tree service. The tree service wiped out her fence. And so she needed a rebuild. We went out and asked, what do you want? She goes, well, I really don't want a fence, per se. I have a pile of old doors that I've collected through the years, and I want to make a fence out of these old doors. And so that's what we did. We listened to the customer and asked them. And many times we go to people's homes and say, what do you want to achieve here? How do you want this to look? And we get response. I've had 5 other companies out here and they never ask me what I want. They just tell me what they're going to do. And so that's one of our biggest things is we want to find out what the customer wants and listen to them. Once we understand what our customer's needs is we get to work. Wow. Okay, so obviously I had a very nice PowerPoint, and I had my words queued off that I was going to talk to you guys about, queued off the PowerPoint, but since that's not working for me today, So, we're different in the fact that we schedule specific times. So if you call our office to schedule an appointment, we don't give you a window and say, we're going to be there between 8 and noon. If we say we're going to be there at 8, we're there at 8 in the morning. So we have those specific times because we know everybody's life is busy. You have things you need to do. And then we also have our craftsman calls the night before to go over your project with you. So when they get there, they know that they have all the right tools to do the job that you need done in your home. So I would just want to thank you all for coming out today. If you have any other questions, see us afterwards, and you have a great day.
Can we give Charles another round of applause, please? Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Serving as today's moderator is Peter Rudolph, a business attorney at the Galloway Law Group. He serves on our board and as chair of the Government Affairs Committee. Please join me in welcoming Peter this morning.
Good morning. I feel like I should do the same thing everybody else always does. That's pathetic. Good morning. Yeah, right. Thanks, Yvonne. In each race today, we're going to begin with a 1-minute opening statement by each candidate. To maintain the Chamber's reputation for impartiality, the candidates to speak first for each race was chosen by a coin flip prior to the start of today's forum. That was an exciting affair. Following our opening statements, candidates will then be asked a series of questions developed by the Government Affairs Committee. Alternating first response positions, each candidate will get a 2-minute period for response to the question posed. Candidates for the House and Senate races that we're going to hear after the prosecutors will each answer question number 1 before we move on to question number 2. You'll see how that works when it comes up. Because each candidate gets 2 minutes for each question, the questions will be displayed on the screens to help the candidates and us, the audience, recall which questions were asked. After those predetermined questions are answered, the candidates will then get a chance to pose a question of their own to their opponent. And in that segment, each individual will have 1 minute to pose their question, their opponent will have 1 minute to respond, and vice versa. Helping our candidates keep track of time this morning, Yvonne will be holding up large time cards that say 1 minute, 30 seconds, etc. And then, if they've extended their time, we will have a very fancy bell to let them know that their time has expired. So, what we're going to do today, because we've got 6 candidates here for legislative positions and 2 candidates here for county prosecutor positions, we're going to bring the prosecutor candidates up first and have them answer their questions first. So, I'm pleased to introduce to you the candidates for the Snohomish County prosecutor position, Brett Rogers and Jason Cummings. Please, come on up. You each have a microphone in front of you. Can we pick it up and make sure that it's working and ready to go?
Testing, testing, test.
All right, sounds great. So first we're going to ask each of you to give your opening statements. You'll both have a minute to speak. Based on our coin flips, Mr. Brett Rogers, you get to go first.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here this morning. So my name is Brett Rogers. I'm running for Snohomish County Prosecuting Attorney. In my opinion, the way that we respond to crime has gotten off track. We have, everywhere you look, crime is out of control. There are catalytic converter thefts, shootings, and fentanyl. Fentanyl is the scourge. In calling for compassion, we've excused too much criminal behavior, we've enabled addiction, and we continue to allow too many of our fellow human beings to live in truly deplorable conditions. So things don't need to be this way. We can hold people accountable for their actions while ensuring that suspects are treated fairly and without turning our back on crime victims. You can learn more about me by finding me on Facebook and visiting votebrettrogers.com. Thank you.
Mr. Jason Cummings, your opening statement, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to the Chamber for hosting this event. My name is Jason Cummings. I'm running for Snohomish County Prosecuting Attorney. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a local kid, grew up here in the county, lifelong resident, raised my family here, and I've spent the last 24 years in the Prosecuting Attorney's Office serving this community. The last 15 as the Chief Civil Deputy, running the Civil Division of the office, and managing the office's $30 million budget. It's safe to say that the issues that appear every day on the front page are the issues that we face in the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. It's critical that we work to maintain safe, livable communities. It's critical that we have integrity, and it's critical that we have transparency. I'm proud to be the only candidate with broad bipartisan support, and most proud of the support that I have from those in the front lines, the law enforcement community, the firefighters, and the deputy prosecuting attorneys. When many people talk about being on both sides of the aisle, I'm proud to be here this morning to say I've got both sides of I-5 and their support, from Mayor John Naring to the Tulalip tribes. So I'm excited to be here. We'll look forward to meeting everyone, and feel free to ask questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you both. So we're on to our first question. It's the prosecutor's job to enforce the law and to act as a legal representative for the state and the community and the victim of crime. That job is specifically not to decide which laws should or should not be enforced. That's the job of the legislature. If elected, what will you do to ensure that the prosecutor's office is enforcing the laws that are on the books? And Mr. Cummings, you respond first.
Obviously, the legislature is the critical part to drafting and adopting those laws, and it's the courts that uphold those laws or change those laws at times. But the prosecutor's office is there to enforce those laws. And over the last 24 years, it's been imperative that we enforce those laws in a manner that is without politics. We enforce those laws based on the facts and the laws. One of the most important things that the elected prosecutor needs to do is to fight for those resources. We see a constant struggle for the general fund dollars in our community. And as prosecutor, we'll continue to work towards fighting for those communities and adding more resources. In the present budget cycle, we've requested 2 DPAs to focus exclusively on violent crime homicides. We've requested a DPA to focus exclusively on gun violators and prolific offenders. And finally, we've requested DPA to focus on training both internal but also external, working with our law enforcement community to ensure that we are able to readily adapt and be prepared for the changes that come, whether it be from a Supreme Court decision or from new legislation out of Olympia. And these are critical aspects. The resources of the prosecutor's office are thin, and we'll continue to fight hard for them. But as a result, we have to prioritize the cases that we prosecute. We will start with violent crime, homicides, crimes against children, sex crimes, crimes against the person. But when we get down to other crimes, if we do not have those resources, it's regrettable that they are going to sit on the back burner until we can turn to them. But what's important is being able to fight for those resources, to bring the bodies in, to make sure we can get that job done. Because as community and as business owners here in this community, it's important that you know that we're fighting for you and to make sure that you have a place and an environment to do your work in a positive way.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
It's an unfortunate truth that there's more crime than we have capacity to deal with it, as far as in law enforcement, in the prosecutor's office, and in the courts. So difficult decisions need to be made, and your job as voters is to decide who you want to make those difficult decisions. I agree with Jason, what he just said about where we place our priorities. We prioritize violent crime and crimes against children. Once you go down a little bit on the tier, though, is where you have to start to make those difficult decisions. So my pledge to you is that when we have people that are accused of committing the same type of crime, those people will be treated similarly with no regard to who they are, what they look like, where they're from, or what accent they may or may not have. There's a real danger if we stop paying attention to what types of crimes are being committed and who is committing them. That road leads to discrimination and racism. So my pledge once again to you is that in our charging decisions, we will not take any account, any personal factors to any one individual. We will treat people that are accused of the same crime similarly. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll move on to question number 2 here. Growth is good and it's bad. The growth is good. The consequence of that growth is we have to make difficult decisions, as we're talking about here. Some of these good things include more diversity in business ownership and an increase in housing market prices and localized labor opportunities and things like that. But sometimes the bad includes higher traffic, higher crime, homelessness, and other social ails. Our businesses and communities are seeing impacts with both the good and the bad. So if you are elected as prosecutor, what changes can you make immediately to current policies to make a difference for our business owners and them in the communities? Mr. Rogers, respond first time.
Well, first and foremost, we focus on the most violent and most prolific offenders. We speed up the tempo of our work. An example of that is Ann Davison, the new city attorney in Seattle, reduce the time it takes to make charging decisions from 4 months down to 3 days. Now, granted, we're talking about misdemeanors there, so it's not quite apples to apples, but it does demonstrate that if you have the will to achieve a goal and the desire to do it, you can get it done. As far as specific changes, if elected, we will request bail more frequently. We'll request higher amounts of bail, so long as that bail is reasonable and realistic. Recently, a man was caught breaking into a woman's house at 5 a.m., and bail was set at $500. Now, generally, burglars break in when people aren't home if they're after property. If they know that somebody is home or likely is home, they're there for another reason. $500 in that situation is woefully inadequate. Sentencing. Upon conviction, unless there is a demonstrable reason for leniency, we will seek the high end of the standard sentencing range. The legislature has watered down our criminal laws too much in the last number of years, and criminals no longer respect the justice system. So it's time that we draw a line in the sand and let criminals know that if you commit a crime in Snohomish County and you're convicted, you're going to get the stiffest sentence we can possibly get for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings.
The most important and immediate impact when an elected prosecutor comes in the office is the relationships and the understanding of the criminal justice system. Having been the only candidate in this race who's actually practiced law, who's actually prosecuted cases, and who's worked in the prosecutor's office for the last 24 years, I have the understanding and the relationships that are necessary to develop those immediate policies. Some of the things that we're working on right now, in fact this afternoon I'll be at a meeting is the collaboration of the resources of the Sheriff's Department, the Prosecutor's Office, Human Services, working with Solid Waste Department, working with the Health District, as we focus our limited resources on how do we identify those areas that are the most acute, apply a response team to that area, and to work on bringing forward change in those areas, but recognizing that if you push down on one part of that waterbed, it's going to pop up in another. So we have to be nimble enough to be able to respond to those areas as we move them through. So those policies come from actually having an understanding of how the system works. What's critical is when you hear statements like, we'll ask for the most in bail, or we'll ask for the highest sentence, is that it leaves one major player out of that equation in the criminal justice system, and that is the court. It is the judge that sets bail. It is the judge that makes the determination of what the sentence shall be. And you have to have credibility when approaching the court to not ask for the top and the highest every single time, so that when you do ask for the top or the highest, the court understands the significance, and the court understands how important it is to keep that individual behind bars. So I think it's important that when we talk about immediate policy change, it has to have somebody who has the experience, has the understanding, and has those relationships to get the job done.
Thank you both. So we know that there are terrible injustices being committed against minority communities. Often these individuals and the communities do not understand the complexity of that justice system. And despite the proliferation of diversity in many fields, the practice of law still seriously lags behind. What changes do you feel you can make at the prosecutor's office to help minimize or eliminate the impact of cultural diversity on equitable access to justice? Mr. Cummings.
There's two real components to this question. The first is what can we do on an outward level, and the second is looking inward. First, on an outward level, I'm proud to take the lead on the dashboard project that we're working on at the county. It's one of the first in the nation. It's a law and justice dashboard system that combines data being brought forth by law enforcement community, by the prosecutor's office, and by the courts, so that we can actually identify real facts, real data, and see where the disproportionate impacts are occurring. And this isn't going to solve the question, but it's going to point to the question and allow us to start having good conversations on how we apply our resources, on how we apply our policies, to make sure that everybody is treated in an equitable manner within our system. If we identify an area where there is a disproportionate impact, that becomes the point where we start asking the question, why is there a disproportionate impact here? How should we be allocating our resources to address that disproportionate impact and make a change? But significantly on the inward side, it's, as you point out, the legal community does not have great diversity, and we need to do a better job of bringing diversity into that community. One of the things that we started this summer was an intensive internship program where we are reaching out, bringing in our interns, and not just putting them at a desk and having work throughout the summer. We're actually getting them involved and engaged within our community. We brought our interns as a cohort group to meet with the sheriff, to meet with a Superior Court judge, to meet at the airport, to learn what we do as a county government at Airport, Payne Field. We brought them over to the parks, Live Green Parks, as Tom Tigan will tell you, and they had a chance to learn about the programs and the actual things that county government does and how we as legal advisors can be involved. But more significantly, we broadened our reach. Instead of looking at just the law schools in the state of Washington, Gonzaga, UW, and Seattle U, we broadened it to look to other law schools throughout the country, and brought it to look at diverse law schools across this country so we could bring in more lawyers with greater diversity and greater interest to our community.
Mr. Rogers, same question.
We often hear about certain populations being overrepresented or underrepresented in whatever the issue is. The simple fact that numbers don't exactly equal their proportion in a larger group in society is meaningless. That does not tell us anything. And I think the person you would want in this type of role would demand to see evidence and facts before jumping to conclusions that something is broke or is not working correctly. So this is a very, very complicated issue. I'm sure we can all agree. We could probably discuss this for 2 days straight and not quite peel back all the layers of the onion. So my approach is this, regardless of who we're talking about, whether it's people we're bringing into the prosecutor's office, bringing into the justice system, or people that we're serving, whether that be crime victim or a criminal suspect, we will treat these people as individual human beings. Again, without regard for what they look like, where they're from, their education level, their income level. We will treat them as individual humans, and they all have value, and we will respect that value, but they will be treated equally, again, without any regard for any individual characteristics.
All right, now the exciting question. Each of you have 1 minute to ask your opponent a question, and then you have 1 minute to respond. So, Mr. Rogers, ask your question first of Mr. Cummings, and then when you're done answering Mr. Cummings, just ask a question back.
Thank you. If you're elected, what, if anything, would you change, or what would you do differently than what's currently occurring in the prosecutor's office?
Having been in the office for over 24 years and served 4 different elected prosecuting attorneys, every elected prosecutor comes in with a different perspective and a different policy. I think it's critical that we recognize the differences of those individuals. And I think that as coming in as the next prosecuting attorney, the things that I will look to change are, one, going back to partnering with our community. I'm pleased from the conversations I've had with mayors and police chiefs across this county about the desire to have the prosecutor engaged and working with them at the local level. I am excited about the opportunities of partnering with them so we can address the root level causes, not just the crime itself, but we need to be looking at the substance use disorder and the mental health disorders that are on our streets. A lot of people like to say, well, if this is just going to be a continuation of the former administration. It's not that at all. In fact, my current boss, Adam Cornell, the elected prosecutor, and I don't always agree on things. He came to me, I think we all recognize there's pre-pandemic life and post-pandemic, so I always chart it in that area. Before the pandemic, there was legislation in Olympia that was going to look to legalize substance use or legalize or decriminalize the use of illicit substances. And he came to me and asked me, what do you think about that? And my response was, I think it's a terrible idea because right now we do not have the resources in place in our community, the billions of dollars that need to be invested in beds, in treatment, and providers. And until that's in place, we cannot be in a situation we are now in a post-Blake environment where we have no legal recourse, yet folks wandering the street without the resources that they need to treat those critical co-occurring disorders. And that's where we just disagree. And you'll see other areas where the current elected and I do not agree. But the most important thing is we can still partner to get things done. And that's what's critical for any elected officials, to work with everybody in the community, particularly our law enforcement community and our mayors, in addressing the root level crimes on our streets.
So then your question.
And my question for Brett. Brett, please describe for us what in your legal career and your legal practice prepares you to manage the largest law firm in Snohomish County and its 3 distinct and diverse units.
And Brett, you'll get 2 minutes for the answer because Yvonne gave Jason 2 minutes.
Thank you. I've been a licensed attorney since 2008. There's 2 requirements for this job by law. You have to be a licensed attorney, and you have to live within Snohomish County. So this job is a management position. The elected prosecutor is not in the courtroom trying cases, so this is very much a managerial role. Much like any other CEO or leader of an organization, that leader is not doing the line work day to day. So what I bring to this role is my background in law enforcement. I have over 20 years experience in law enforcement. During that time, I've led teams as large as 120. So I have experience leading law enforcement professionals in a large government organization. I have experience setting policy. I've experienced managing people, setting goals, priorities, strategies, and then following through to make sure that those goals are being met, and if not, course corrections. And I have experience making sure that the line staff have the training and the tools they need to get the job done. That is what I will bring to the role of prosecutor. I will not be in the courtroom trying cases. I will be managing prosecutors. I will make sure that they understand that we are going in a new direction. We're setting new policies. I'll make sure they have the training and the tools they need to do their job effectively serving the people of Snohomish County.
Thank you. So we're going to go to closing statements, and each one of you will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. Mr. Cummings.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being here this morning. This is a great opportunity for us as candidates to come out and meet in our communities and talk with all of you. I think what's important is on the ballot in November, there's a clear distinction and a clear choice. This is my first run for office. I'm not a career candidate. This isn't my third run for 3 different offices in 3 years. What we have is a choice between someone whose whole career has been focused on public safety in the prosecutor's office, whose whole career has been focused on actually practicing law, and whose whole career has been focused on this community. And the difference that I will bring to the table is the relationships and the development that, frankly, this is my home. I care about this place just as much as everyone here. That's why I've been working this community and serving this community. I'm proud of the broad support that I've earned from law enforcement, from firefighters, from the deputy prosecuting attorneys, labor organizations, small business owners, and broad bipartisan support. Why? Because experience matters, and I'll bring that experience to the table to represent all of you. So thank you so much. Have a great morning.
Mr. Rogers, your closing statement.
Thank you all for your time and attention this morning. Unfortunately, as soon as we're done here, I need to leave, but please reach out to me if you have any questions. Shoot me an email. Again, find me on Facebook. Visit votebrettrogers.com. Quick note, I have 20 years of experience in criminal law enforcement. Yes, it was on the law enforcement side, not the prosecutor's side, but I put many bad guys behind bars. My career hasn't been spent in the civil side of the house, and I'm now looking to make the jump over to the criminal side. I'll leave you with a couple questions. Is your community safer than it was 5 or 10 years ago? If not, how bad do things have to get before you decide to vote for something different? Thank you.
Let's all thank the candidates and as they walk off the stage here. We're going to move on to our candidates for the 38th District. And so I can ask all of our candidates for the 38th District to come up and take their seats here. We've got name cards in front of you. Please take down the, here, I'll do it. Please help me welcome the following people. Julio Cortez and Gary Kemp, candidates for District 38, House Position 1. Come on. Yeah. Mark James and Mary Fossey, candidates for 38th, House Position 2. Hi. Hello. Right at the table. And June Robinson and Bernard Moody, candidates for Washington State Senate, 38th District. You do have water in front of you, although we'll have to get a new glass. Can I get a new glass for over here, please? So again, as before, we will start by giving the candidates a chance to make a short opening statement. They'll each have 1 minute to start. The order of candidates was also determined by coin flip. We had a lot of flipping of coins. So what we're going to do during this set of questions is we're basically going to go up and down the row. We've got one set of questions for each, or we've got 3 questions. Everybody's going to answer the same questions. But instead of trying to confuse everybody and work with 2 sets of candidates at a time, we're just going to ask everybody the same question and then move on. So you'll notice that who gets to start and whatnot gets changed throughout the questions. And so here we're going to go to opening statements, and Julio Cortez is going to start, and Mr. Gary Kemp follows up.
Time. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you to the Chamber for putting this on for us. My name is Julio Cortez, running for State Representative for the 38th, Position 1. My family and I immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico when I was about 5 years old. I grew up in Wabato, Washington, about 10 minutes southeast of Yakima. It was a small immigrant farmer working community, which is what my family did. Thankfully, because of their support, I was able to go to Walla Walla Community College for a couple years, then transferred over to Western Washington University, where I graduated in 2009. And as most of you remember, it was a horrible year to go out and find a job. But my entire professional career has been devoted to public service. I worked for Cocoon House, a nonprofit that serves at-risk and homeless youth. So I did direct service for about 3 years. And after that, after 3 years, I worked about 6 to 7 years as a public relations manager, going down to Olympia to testify for and against bills that were going to be affecting the populations we served. The last 5 years, I've been working at the City of Everett in the Communications and Economic Development Department. I'm the small and medium business liaison for the city, so I've been very connected to the business community. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you. Mr. Kemp.
Good morning. My name is Gary Kemp, also running the 38th Legislative District for Position 1. I've lived in Snohomish County for almost over 35 years. I've been married for over 30 years and have 2 wonderful daughters. I graduated locally here from Lakewood High School in '89, where I then enlisted in the United States Air Force, served briefly, and then was medically discharged. After that, I joined a electrical union 5-year apprenticeship program, graduated. I've worked labor jobs all my life. I'm a union electrician with 19 years of experience. And during this time, I served as a union business representative, served 5 years in the administrative position where I developed a desire for politics. And 4 years ago, I was appointed to the Snohomish County Council Performance Audit Committee. And I'm also a very active volunteer in my community. My top 3 priorities when I get there to the legislative is public safety, the economy, and the schools and our education.
Well, thank you. Then we're going to go to Position 2, based on coin flip, Mr. Mark James.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mark James, and I'm running for seat number 2 in the 38th Legislative District, and that includes Everett, Tulalip, and Marysville. I'm a husband, father, veteran, and a committed community leader. I love being involved in my community through my Rotary Club, volunteering at the food bank, and the Salvation Army. As a Marysville City Council member and a local business owner, I understand the hard work that's needed to be successful and how government can help or hinder those it is supposed to serve. My platform is founded on the principles of responsibility, accountability, and consequences. My priorities are first, public safety. I support common sense legislation that will allow our police officers to have the tools that they need to do the job that we're asking them to do. And number 2, the economy. We can help relieve some of this economic anxiety that we are feeling and make life more affordable through strategic tax relief and a balanced and practical budget. And thank you.
Thank you. Mary Fossey.
Hello, my name is Mary Fossey. I currently serve on the Everett City Council. Thank you for having me here today. I am running for Position 2 in the House, and I live at Everett. I'm a mother of 2, a wife of a veteran, and a former small business owner. I currently serve on the Everett Public Schools Fiscal Advisory Committee, and I serve on the Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board, a variety of other places as well. And I have past work as a operations manager, employment specialist, but really what gives me a valuable perspective is that I come from a disadvantaged background of growing up in poverty, and so I know a lot of the barriers that my neighbors face, and I have had success in Everett, and I want the same opportunity for all of my neighbors to have a job, to have a career, to have a home, and that's the experience and perspective I will be bringing to Olympia.
Thank you. Next, we move to 38 Senate candidates. June Robinson, your first opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us and putting on this well-organized forum. I am June Robinson. I currently serve as the state senator for the 38th Legislative District. I have held that position for 2 years. Prior to that, I served 7 years in the State House, also representing you all in the 38th Legislative District. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to represent the people of the 38th District, where I've lived for 25 years, raised kids who are now successful adults, and just to be able to bring that experience and represent all of you in Olympia is a great honor for me. In Olympia, I've forged very positive relationships within both sides of the aisle. I sit on the Healthcare Long-Term Care Committee, the Labor and Commerce Committee, and I'm Vice Chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is an honor that my colleagues selected me for. So thank you again for being here today.
And Mr. Moody, your opening.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Bernard Moody, and I have 45 years experience, starting with the United States Marine Corps at the age of 17, which gave me the foundation and the formation of my work ethic, as well as my morals, I believe. I have also been in the field of law enforcement, and specifically the side of corrections, for almost 34 years. I have 25 years here in Snohomish County, where I moved over here from the beautiful state of Hawaii, where I served in the prison system over there for 9 years. I also worked 1 year in Washington State prison system over here in Monroe. Extensive experience with the offenders and the people that we all are here to try to protect ourselves from. I believe my diverse background and the fact that I'm a minority. I remember having to sit on the back of the bus when I was a kid because I had to. So I have a perspective that very few probably have. And just thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to our first question, I really think Mr. Cummings said it best. We have a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world, and so when we're talking about these things, we have to think about the reality of being post-COVID. And so with the expiration of the COVID state of emergency, which is sometime in October, various dates in October, Washington has seen a rush to make permanent through legislation some of Governor Inslee's mandates without perhaps the benefit of legislative process native to the creation of laws. So which of the governor's mandates would you seek to extend through your submission of bills, and why? And would you add limits or restrictions or expand those policies, and how? And so we're going to start back over here on this side. Mr. Moody, why don't you start us off?
I believe there's very few people in this room that have not been affected negatively by the mandates that we all have had, and Washington State having still the emergency powers that are in place, which my opponent has actually voted for the governor to keep, and the legislators attempted to rein in some of those powers. I, as a citizen and as a productive member of the community, I have found it very hard for me to go to work because I work in a job that requires my presence, and to see people that are out of work and to see people that are suffering. That's not been comfortable, and I've been fortunate as well as felt bad for the fact that we have so many that are suffering from these mandates, and the legislators have not done their due diligence at being able to protect our citizens and our communities. The one thing that I probably would like to see kept permanent would be like the waiting period for the unemployment checks that was waived, that 1 week worth of time where a person was unemployed, they had to wait to get their benefits. And oftentimes, some of them didn't even get it then because they had to go through a whole litigated type of process that just got bogged down in bureaucracy. So I think that would be a good thing to keep some of those resources still available. So if that is possible, I would support the legislation to create that, as well as like-minded or like-similar events where we could keep people employed and keep people from not losing their income just because of difficulties.
June Robinson.
Thank you. To start out, I am not aware of, no one has approached me regarding legislation to continue mandates. I'm certainly not planning to, if I'm reelected, certainly not planning to run any bills that would keep mandates in place. I have a public health background. I was working in local public health during the dark days of 2020 when we did lockdown. That was a very dark and scary time. We have never experienced a pandemic like we've had in our lifetime. We only had 1917 and the Spanish flu to look on for guidance as to how to handle it. And I strongly believe that during an emergency, one person needs to be in charge. That's true in the military, and I think it's true on the civil side when there is an emergency. Many of the mandates were put in place to expedite processes that allowed our community and our government agencies to respond quickly. Mr. Moody just mentioned unemployment. There were many mandates around healthcare so that we could get the resources that our healthcare facilities and long-term care facilities needed. I mean, in the beginning, we didn't have personal protective equipment, masks, gloves for healthcare workers. So there were a lot of things that the governor did to put in place just to manage that very difficult situation. The mandates, the state of emergency is ending at the end of October. I certainly think it's time for that to happen, and I look forward to moving on and helping our community recover post-COVID.
Thank you. For position 2, Mary Fossey.
Thank you. Washington had the first reported case, and I know because they were actually a patient in the hospital down the street from me, and it was right after my daughter was born, and we were there. And there were a lot of protective measures that were put into place, and our state ultimately had one of the lowest per capita death rates in the nation. While I don't have any specific bills that I'm putting forward to extend any mandates, I do know that through the pandemic, a lot of workers and a lot of families and a lot of seniors and a lot of small businesses have struggled and continue to do so. And so moving forward as a legislator in Olympia, these are going to be the people that I will be focusing on. I will be making sure that our small businesses, have a leg to stand on, that we give them the supports that they need, that our workers will continue to have jobs available to them and living wages and affordable childcare, and that we can help our students and our families with mental health supports and accessible health care that's affordable. Those are going to be my priorities going forward as a legislator.
Thank you. Mark James.
Thank you. I'm going to do a little different tact on my answer on this. I did a deep dive, and I hope you appreciate some of the information I'm going to share. First, there were 85 emergency orders from the governor, and roughly 3/4 of those have already been removed. On February 29th, 2020, Governor Inslee declared a state of emergency, enabling him to exercise emergency powers that were granted through RCW 43.06.220 Parts 1 and 2. That's significant, and I'll share why. Part 1 of that RCW has to do with prohibiting activities. These orders have no expiration date. Part 2 of that RCW deals with waiving or suspending existing statutes. And these orders all expire after 30 days. For these Part 2 orders, the four corners of the legislature, the 2 House leaders and the 2 Senate leaders, met with the governor and extended many of these suspensions and waivers throughout that 2.5 years. That's a good thing. They cut through the red tape in order to streamline the much-needed help for the people of Washington. The contentious orders that so many people had issues with were from Part 1 of the RCW, like prohibiting the number of people allowed in businesses or prohibiting students and teachers from attending schools in person. What we need now is emergency powers reform. The legislature needs to reclaim its authority from the executive branch. Emergency powers reform would require the legislature to be involved after a predetermined period, 30, 60, 90 days, for all of those Part 1 orders, after which time they would convene a special session and consider debate continuing, ending, or starting orders that address the ongoing issues. The governor's approach may have been justifiable early on in the pandemic, but it quickly became unfair to the other branches of government, and that unchecked authority needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. For position 1, Mr. Kemp, you go first.
I wouldn't seek to extend any of the governor's mandates, and I wouldn't be putting forward any bills to do so. I do believe the governor did the right thing at the time when we needed him to, but not for as long as he did. I do believe we need to visit the revised Code of Washington, make some changes, limiting the amount of time that they, whoever the governor may be at the time, can have emergency powers without a legislative approval. While the governor's mandates did some good, they also did a lot of harm to our communities, including our schools and many of our local businesses. A lot of our businesses either shut down or, lost a lot of profit, while big retail stayed open. To me, that showed a lot of bias in the business community, and I believe some of our mandates overstepped what they were meant to do in the beginning.
Thank you. Mr. Cortez.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we learned a lot as a state and as a people through the pandemic. And, while some policies do deserve moderation and reexamination, other emergency measures I think should be maintained. Specifically, over the 2020 and 2021, I spent a lot of time doing community outreach in my role at the City of Everett. Every day I heard about the good and the bad of how policies and safeguards, relief efforts, and mandates impacted employers and employees. I would like to see the state pass or extend pandemic measures in legislation that support the small business-friendly policies like expansion of open-air dining, which I heard a lot from business owners that created a lot of positivity for their economy. Takeout cocktails, flexibility for at-home small businesses and service providers, and other areas where we loosened the restrictions and red tape, and opened new doors for business development. Although not perfect overall, I think we did learn a lot, and from a public health standpoint, we did what we did in Washington State helped. It was a success. Some of the lowest infection and death rates in the nation. The protections for vulnerable populations were really good. Thanks to vaccinations, we are in a much safer place today than we were throughout the pandemic, but we must remember that people are still getting sick. They're still dying from COVID. We learned a lot the past 2 years, and what we don't want is to see a political reaction or a desire to move backwards. We don't want to undermine the progress we have made to keep people safe and healthy, and also provide opportunities and flexibility for our small business community. I really, truly believe we can do both.
Thank you. We're going to move on to question number 2 now. As communities grow and demographics change, representation matters. People like to see themselves reflected in positions of leadership and governance. How will you, if elected, use your elected position to promote and support underrepresented and underserved populations of color so that we can see more diverse representation in government? Mr. Mark James, you go first.
Thank you, Peter. Well, for starters, these things have always mattered to me. We all want the best leaders in leadership, regardless of age, gender, race, creed, or color. I've always been an advocate of equal opportunity for all people. If I'm ever made aware of obstacles to equal opportunity, I will be the first in line to remove that obstacle. Diversity is to be desired, but the goal is good governance with fair and equal treatment of all people. The best people for that job are those who are aware and sensitive to the needs of all of their constituents in order to protect and provide equal opportunity to everyone. We need leaders in government that are committed to identifying and eradicating discrimination. As far as promoting opportunities for minorities, there are supportive groups and nonprofits whose goal is to find, train, and support minorities to run for elected office. I applaud and encourage the efforts of these organizations. Thank you.
Ms. Mary Fossey.
So growing up in poverty and experiencing homelessness and a lot of those barriers that folks go through, being born into low-income housing, having a single mother, that kind of adversity is going to be a really valuable perspective. It's inspired me in my life when working with my community to advocate for those that are not in the policy-making arenas and for bringing everybody to the table. I'm endorsed by the Tulalip tribes. I have strong support also from my Marshallese community that I've worked with for a very long time, advocating for, their interests and concerns and needs. And I think as leaders, it's important for us to elevate other people's voices and acknowledge that diversity is a strength, that stakeholdering builds stronger policy, and that is definitely something that I will be working on in Olympia. Thanks.
All right, we'll go to House Position Candidates 1 first, or next here. Mr. Cortez.
Yeah, thank you. Well, obviously, as a Mexican man, I know for a fact that representation matters. Our minority populations are growing not only here in the district, but across the state. I will use my position to motivate, empower, and provide opportunities for our BIPOC communities by using my lived and professional experience to really pass policies with an equity lens. I think that something that I want to make sure happens is that equity lens when we are providing support specifically to small businesses. What I learned through the pandemic while I was doing work with the small business owners is that when I visited the BIPOC business owners or business owners with English as a second language or business owners that were a little bit older, they weren't getting the same information that other businesses were getting, or they were getting it too late, or they weren't understanding it. And there was so much support, so much funding available for small business owners, and a lot of them just weren't simply able to get the information on time or didn't get it at all. As a government, we need to build better relationships with our BIPOC communities. We need to meet them where they are and truly represent them. As a minority myself, that's exactly what I intend to do when I'm down in Olympia. In my role at the city as part of the economic development team, I'm already pretty connected with the businesses regionally. I'm continuing to work to get connected to more Everett businesses, Marysville businesses, and Tulalip businesses because they truly deserve a better voice in Olympia. I'm also planning a lot of speaking engagements with a couple groups to make sure that I'm there, I'm available to folks, and I want to share my story as a minority candidate on what I'm seeing out on the streets and hopefully encourage them to run for office, to be part of a board, and simply just get involved in their community.
Mr. Kemp.
Well, the best part about being a former union representative and a construction worker is that I get to work with a very diverse community, the BIPOC community, every day. I don't look at people based on the color of skin, religion, or gender. I look at future members of my craft as valued additions to the team. We don't judge them by class status, but by the value they bring as a person. We really need to start seeing each other through the eyes of children again, honestly. They don't see diversity, skin color, or separate people into classes. They go to school, they make friends, they just run around, be themselves. I'm afraid that's taught in our schools. And honestly, I would see that as we call it minority person and treat them as equally as I would treat anybody else in the community. I would help them in any way I could help them, just as I would anybody else on my job sites.
Thank you. For the Senate candidates, Ms. Robinson, let's hear from you.
Thank you, and thank you for this important question. It is very important that people can see themselves in their elected officials, and representation does matter. I am proud of the work that we've done while I've been elected in Olympia to diversify the representation, both gender and racially. We have many more members of color and many more women representatives and senators than when I started in 2014. So in a relatively short time, we've done a lot of work, I think, to diversify who's there. I believe it's my job, part of my job as an elected, as a community leader, to seek out people of color, people from underserved minority communities who would be good candidates and who could represent us, and to encourage that. Also, as a legislator, I've worked to not pass laws, but to support and encourage an equity lens in the work that we do. So, for example, our caucus, the Senate Democratic Caucus that I'm a member of currently, has worked to really diversify the staff that the caucus hires. Also, as we build our state operating budget, which I play a vital role in, we do use an equity lens and make sure that we're really examining investments that we make in the state to make sure that they do reach out and affect our communities of color as well as the general population. But we really want to make sure that people are not being left out through the budgeting process. So I believe that there's always more work to do. It's always something that I need to work on myself individually, but I am proud of the progress that we've made.
Thank you. Mr. Moody.
I didn't know I was BIPOC. However, with that being said, as obvious, I am a minority, and I am both black and white. I did my DNA, actually have 58% European and 42% African. However, my birth certificate says Negro. I lived in a world where if you weren't white or if you weren't Caucasian, you were then black. Didn't matter how much you were. I couldn't call myself Caucasian, even though I have more European in me than I don't. So that very fact tells me that we have a problem. I've worked all my life maintaining the attitude from back in my Marine Corps days of wanting to be a private, because I didn't want to get upset about having to do the jobs that nobody else wanted to do. So I just made it a habit of mine to make it my job to want to do the things that nobody else wants to do. And in doing that, it crafted a good work ethic in me. I want to be a representation of not only my community, but those that are crossing those lines like myself, where I have both black and white in me. I believe that we have a lot more work to do. We have established a lot of effort at trying to bring up minorities, and I think we could do it better by empowering some educational opportunities. I'm the first one in my family to ever own a house. I am the first generation to ever get out of the welfare mentality, and I am not a victim of my past. I am a victor of my past. And I wish to represent that in the legislators, in the legislative community, and I want to be able to serve them as well as invite others that are like me that can look at me and realize that they can do it too.
Thank you all. So for our third question, given the current state of politics, give us an example of how you will reach across the aisle to your colleagues with a different political ideology. And then, how will you respond if they don't reach back? What concessions are you willing to make to get that handshake? Gary Kemp, let's have you go first.
We've had a one-party system in place for quite some time now, but we need to have a balance between the two. We need to have conversations across the aisle to produce any good legislation in the state. As I've been out door knocking, one of the third biggest concerns I've heard is the people are tired of partisan politics. They're tired of the people that are too far right, and they're tired of the people that are too far left. I have the lived experiences on job sites, leading as a foreman, a union steward, and a union business representative. It's taught me that if you cannot work together, this job's going to slow down or not get done. Concessions are all about negotiations, and I'm going to negotiate what is best for the people of the 38th Legislative District and for Washington State. We need to be able to have those conversations across the aisles. We need to be able to come together and work what's best for the people, not for the far left or for the far right, but for everybody else that's sitting in the middle.
Julio Cortez.
Thank you. Well, you know, I've been out doorbelling a lot in the last 6 months. I've had a lot of conversations at the doorstep, a lot of community group conversations, and I've spoken to a lot of folks over the phone. A lot of people, both Republicans and Democrats. And something I've learned is that the vast majority want the same thing. They understand what's important to our communities, and we're just trying to get there in a little bit of a different way. There's also a lot of folks on both sides that create very negative and at times false narratives about each other, and that really doesn't help anyone. It divides us, and that's not what we need to do as a state. When I'm in Olympia, I will work to have honest conversations with folks from across the aisle and find a balanced approach to the issues and actually serve our community. You know, you'll be surprised what honest conversations over a beer or over a cup of coffee can do. Now, you know, I know that we're not going to agree on everything, but I hope that with open dialogue of the why we can't agree on it and the ability for us to continue to have conversations after we disagree, it's important for the future. You know, we need to make sure that we're serving the community and we keep our constituents up front in our minds. As far as concessions, you know, of course, if I feel that any concessions are going to negatively affect the constituents of my district, I'm not going to make them. But if I see that concessions through negotiation are going to make my constituents' lives better, then we're going to talk. And that's what we need to do. That's what we need to continue to do, is talk to each other across the aisle and keep our constituents in front of our mind and keep their best interests in mind as well.
Mary Fossey, we'd love to hear your answer.
Thank you. I really appreciate you asking this question, and I'm also in agreement with Mr. Cortez's answer. I come from a community advocacy background, and I absolutely love doorbelling. I love going and chatting with my neighbors and hearing about what their priorities are and their concerns and any ideas that they have for change. And, you know, of course, we come across people that may have different ideas and perspectives than us, but I don't think that conflict has to be bad. I was elected in my last race with broad bipartisan support, and I'm proud of that. But I think that diversity in perspective and opinion can lead to a lot of innovation. And I've already mentioned before that stakeholdering and bringing, you know, a variety of voices to the table is a priority of mine. And so that is a collaboration skill that I plan to bring with me to this role. ASARCO, a lot of you might have heard about the grassroots campaign that I ran as a volunteer to secure funding to clean up the toxic contamination soils of lead and arsenic that we had in North Everett. And through a coalition of neighbors, we secured $5.5 million with the help of Senator Robinson and Mike Sells. It was something, though, that was started by somebody who had a very different perspective on life and a very different ideology than I did. But they had a very real life concern and problem that needed a solution. So we were able to work together to find something to improve the quality of life for all of our neighbors in North Everett, and that's because we work together. So that kind of collaboration and that kind of foresight and openness is definitely what I'll be doing in Olympia.
What's your response, Mark James?
I've always recognized that good communication is a two-way street. Listening to opposing viewpoints and seeking to understand different perspectives is critical to balanced legislation. I'm a respectful, measured person, and I look for the common ground. And these are actually the things that I've done in my 5 years as a city council member. As a legislator, If I get shut down, I don't take it personally, and I continue to pursue my colleague even if they don't reach back. Regarding concessions, I would tell my colleague that I'm willing to have a two-way conversation about this. If there was a bill that we both wanted to sponsor and we had different opinions on it, if we don't both offer concessions and come to a consensus, the bill will die. We both need to keep in mind that neither party has a monopoly on the truth. I would like to share a quick story with you as an example of how not working together can affect good, balanced legislation. This story comes directly from a legislator friend of mine during the 2022 session. The minority party had worked long and hard on a transportation package that was sustainable, created no new taxes, and fulfilled all of the maintenance and transportation projects needed on both sides of the mountains. The majority party rejected it outright without even looking at it, and instead went on to push through their own $17 billion package that was not sustainable and required new taxes and heavily favored the west side of the mountains. So this story just shows the importance of listening to opposing views and allowing concessions, which can result and should result in better legislation that benefits everyone. Thank you.
Bernard Moody, would you share your response?
I do have notes up here, that I could read from and, practice the answers that, they gave me the questions to. But I just don't talk well like that, the current state of our politics is deplorable. We have so much lack of bipartisanship that people are not even agreeing to disagree. We have all the votes that I've seen on bills that have come down out of Olympia are all along party lines. And it's almost like either party will not allow a dissent from their own group to go to the other side to even support something that might be good for the community. I've had to work twice as hard to get half as far as somebody who has been either born into it or has been just, blessed enough to be able to get it given to them. So I worked hard, and I'm 62 years old, and I will continue to work just as hard. I have had to reach a I know what it's like to not or to be rejected, because half of my life has been spent being rejected. But you know what? I don't let it bother me. In fact, I take it as a challenge, because we are here legislating love. How bad is that? And, I just want to be that example of that light, of being able to say, you know what, I can love you just because you're here. Working in the field of corrections that I have all the years, I've worked with a whole lot of bad people, and a lot of bad people that I didn't even like. And I have learned through not judging them for what I know about them, but to deal with them based off the fact of what we need to do to get through where we're at the time. And so going down into Olympia, I would like to take that attitude and that heart of going down there and just say, hey, you know what, we need to love each other. There's more. We have more in common than divides us, and we need to stop playing politics and going along with our party just because they tell us to, or fear that we're going to lose something from them.
June Robinson, please wrap us up.
Thank you. Well, I do want to do a bit of a fact check on my opponent. Actually, over 90% of the bills that we pass in Olympia are bipartisan. The ones that make the headlines maybe aren't, but we work always, try to work always across the aisle and get support from both sides for any legislation that we pass. Sometimes it's not possible, but most of the time it is. I want to give a great example that I was very involved in and continue to be involved in, and that is our state's paid family and medical leave program. In 2017, the state Senate was controlled by Republicans. The state House, where I was sitting at the time, was controlled by Democrats. There was a strong will to try to get a paid family and medical leave for our state. We had the most amazing negotiations between workers, employers, employees, Democrats, and Republicans. We started with our own ideas of what a policy might look like. We spent hours sitting around a table together, advocates, legislators, staff of agencies who would implement the bill, hashing out details, each side making big concessions so that we could get a policy that worked, that would be supported by both Democrats and Republicans, by the employer community and the worker advocates. What we have is a very popular state program that is being used more than we ever imagined that it would. I currently co-chair a committee. I'm one co-chair, Republican is the other co-chair, looking at how to make sure that that program remains sustainable. Since it is oversubscribed, we are needing to go back and look at how it's funded. But in that, I just want to finish my thought. In that work, we do not do anything that will not get agreement between both the Republicans and the Democrats, the business community and the employers. So a lot of work is done across the aisle.
Well, thank you. Now we're on to questions for each other. Bernard Moody, we'll have you ask June Robinson first.
You're picking on me.
I'm giving you a first opportunity.
I get a couple dozen that I would really like to ask. I guess my biggest one is, your party's been in power for many years. We had a lot of trifectas, I guess they call it, where they have the governor's mansion, the Senate, and the House. And I find that, with all of that power, with all of that ability, that the efforts that have come out have been kind of very minimum. We don't have the resources that we have right now. We have homelessness that is just raging. We've spent billions, I'm sure, on it. You know that better than I. So my question would be is, with all of the problems that we have and with the fact that your party's been in power for so long, why are we still in this mess?
Well, thank you for that. The homelessness is a very serious and seemingly intractable problem that communities around the country are facing right now. As far as the Democrats being in power, as I just said, when I got to the legislature, Republicans controlled the Senate. The House has been in Democratic control for quite a long time, but it's only since 2018, which isn't that long ago, that Democrats took control of the state Senate. Why do we still have problems? I guess we don't have all the answers. We're working, again, across the aisle to do the best that we can, use the state resources to the extent that they're available to drive solutions out into communities, and that's what I want to continue to do if I'm reelected.
Well, don't put that mic down. You get to ask your own question.
Thank you. If you're elected, half of your constituents, at least half, will be women. I'd like you to explain your position on women's right to access full reproductive care, including abortion services when necessary.
Well, our state has taken to the legislators initiatives of the people supporting abortion laws that we have. I may not necessarily agree with them, but as a representative of my district, I will support and defend those laws as they have them. I am very partial to women. My most favorite one is my mom, and she was 14 years old when she got pregnant with me. And my father was at least 22 at the time, so by definitions of the term, he would be called a child molester today. And so I am very fortunate that, the laws that they had then at least gave me an opportunity to have life. And so I want to be that representative to say there's other alternatives. Let's talk about creating less death than to have more. And so I want to work to create that opportunity and to be that example.
Mary Fossey, your opportunity to ask a question to Mark James.
Thank you. So I think in the same vein, I have similar concerns with the amount of anti-abortion legislation that Republicans have put forward in recent years, some calling for outright bans and some calling for parental notifications and others to fight against procedures with any sort of public funding. I guess my question would be, would you vote yes or no for any restrictions on Washington's abortion laws? And if yes, what laws or restrictions would those be?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm not an extremist on this, and the laws in the state of Washington currently have restrictions, and I would uphold them. We have term limits on the time that you can have an abortion in Washington. In 1994, I believe it was it was an initiative by the people that prevented live birth abortions and midterm type abortions where the baby was at, I think we have it in our legislation, says at the point of viability. So my viewpoint on to answer your question directly is that's what I would uphold. I'm not an extremist on this. I believe both sides are very passionate. I am pro-life. I understand that you may be midterm abortion person, and that's almost to the point where you could give birth to a live baby, and I'm not okay with that. As I said, I'm personally pro-life. I believe in the will of the people, and the voters of Washington have spoken clearly on this already.
Mark James, ask your question in response.
So, Mary, given that we are in what would traditionally be defined as a recession and that inflation is at all-time highs, in fact, the Department of Labor shows that over the past year, food is up 11.4%, energy prices jumped 24.1%, largely due to the high prices of gasoline, and gas is going up again. And the fact that Washington State has had surpluses in the last 2 sessions, including a $15 billion surplus this last session, and the majority party managed to spend it all. Will you commit to providing meaningful tax relief to the residents of the 38th Legislative District? And if so, what tax relief would you propose? Excuse me.
So this is actually something we've been hearing at the doors, is that a lot of folks have been very concerned about making ends meet, going from, paycheck or two away from possibly losing their housing. And it is a struggle. There is high costs everywhere. And all of our district is feeling that kind of pinch. I understand that the revenue projection is not as positive as it has been in the past. And there are a lot of income inequalities out there, and higher divided haves and haves not since the pandemic started. My role will be to support working families first and foremost, small businesses, making sure that they have pathways, and that is going to be my priorities going forward, and where I will make my decisions made is with them at the center of all of them.
Julio Cortez, your chance to ask Gary Kemp a question.
Great, thank you. So Gary, you've shared publicly that you are anti-choice, but that you wouldn't seek to change any existing laws. How can this community trust that you won't side with anti-choice Republicans who continue to propose legislation that restricts reproductive autonomy and health care? And again, I work very closely with the business community. What's your message to businesses who have spoken out about the negative impacts of these bans, not only on the well-being, recruitment, and advancement of women, but the cost of disruption posed by providing travel and time away so women can obtain the services that they deserve?
Well, I'm going to have to stick with a similar close answer to my colleague Mark James here. I'm not an extremist. I am a pro-life candidate. But I also believe that there are some certain circumstances where it may be necessary. Like in 1970, the people spoke. The people spoke into a law the rights that right now. And I'm going to stand up for what the people voted for. I'm not going to vote against my own constituents. That's what I think.
And what is your question for Mr. Cortez?
Hey, Julio. given that the governor and some of the Democratic Party is pushing through their energy and climate plan pretty quickly by eliminating gas vehicles by 2030, stopping the use of natural gas, which is cheaper for house building, deleting our coal and fuel refineries here real soon, and possibly they don't have a plan for building other energy sources yet. Will you vote with your party on these issues and let the unions know that have backed you that you will be eliminating tens of thousands of union and good-paying family wage jobs?
Yeah, great question. So, I've spoken to a lot of the unions already. I've been, thankful to receive the endorsement of a lot of unions that are dealing with this issue. And I think, that is a concern of mine as well. We're moving very closely to have an energy grid. We're not going to be able to move quickly enough to get there, and at the same time, get rid of all those jobs in the fossil industry. I see, gas as a bridge energy that we could work to get apprenticeship programs from fossil fuels over to gas and from gas over to the electric grid once we get there, once we're able to do that. As far as electric vehicles, I think in 2035, that's where they're just going to stop selling them. They'll still be out in the streets. It's not like they're going to go out and take them away from you. But I think we do need to take proactive steps to make sure that we address the climate issue that we're already seeing a lot earlier than anticipated. But yeah, jobs is one thing that I want to make sure that we keep, and I think apprenticeship programs through Bridge Energies is the way we can do that.
I want to thank all of you for those questions and answers. When we're developing questions, we're always stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's so many good issues out there that we have to pick a discrete number few. And when you ask those questions and answer them, it brings up a whole other discussion that we could have. So we're going to have some closing statements, and you'll each have 1 minute to speak. And I'm going to start at the far end of the room and come down this way. So Julio Cortez, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, first, again, thanks to the Chamber. Thanks for all of you for taking an interest in government. We need more folks to take an interest in government. I appreciate everybody's support that I've gotten. I saw some union memberships here. I'm a candidate that's been endorsed by more unions than any other candidate. I want to continue to work hard. I'm ready to hit the ground running when I'm in Olympia. I'm having conversations already with a lot of folks that are going to help me get there, that are going to help me have the information that I need in order to make sure that I'm successful. I want to hear from both sides. I want to hear from folks that have different experiences, that have different perspective on things. That's what I do in my daily life today at the City of Everett in the Communication and Economic Development Departments, and I look forward to taking my lived and professional experience down to Olympia. I'm ready to work for you. Thanks so much.
Gary Kemp.
Thank you to the Marysville Tulalip Chamber for having us here today. Being a union electrician, I've noticed a few outlets that need to be changed out in Olympia. And there's a few dim light bulbs there. Some of the past legislation needs to be rewired, and they need a representative that has a lived experience in leading. This isn't a job I take on lightly. I take safety very seriously, and the state needs to be safer. We need to be able to look to leaders for answers, and those leaders need to be able to listen and learn. I've been endorsed by many of the leaders in this community and by the Association for Washington Businesses, which hopefully you guys can appreciate. If you would care to, please learn more about my campaign at Kemp, FORWA.com. And once again, thank you for having us all here and taking part in the government process.
Mark James, you're next.
Thank you all again for coming out and being here with us to hear the different viewpoints from the candidates. I want to bring common sense back to Washington state politics. The people of Washington deserve to have a balanced legislature that has a chance at producing fair and balanced legislation. As you know, we currently are so lopsided that the majority party doesn't even have to seriously consider the opinions of the minority. It's not even close, and that has to change. I'd like to bring back practical solutions to the drug, homelessness, and housing issues, and I want to improve on the road and transportation options by seriously considering recent proposals that the minority party presented but that were completely ignored. Finally, I want to see more education opportunities like skilled trade pathways and support for private school options for our kids. I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you for your time and attention.
Mary Fossey, 1 minute.
Thanks. So before working at the legislature, I was the small business owner teaching STEM education in our local schools and libraries. And a lot of my community just knew me as that community advocate and that volunteer, and I've invested a lot of time with my neighbors. I'm a problem solver. I like to hear about people's issues, and if I'm not an expert on the subject, I'm very resourceful in finding out whose voice needs to be there so that we can find ample solutions. And that's why I'm endorsed by the firefighters. That's why I'm endorsed by over 30 different labor organizations, as well as our federal representatives. They see that I like to help my community and that I believe that government should be helping people. And that is what I'm going to do in Olympia, is I'm going to be fighting for everyone in this community and making sure that we have well-paid jobs and opportunities coming here, childcare. We're going to be fighting for, our seniors to be able to stay in their homes and actually be able to live full lives. And so that is what I'm going to be fighting for, is our most vulnerable. And with Mike Sells leaving, we're going to need some advocates in Olympia, and I'm proud to have his endorsement as well.
June Robinson.
Thank you, and thank you for having us this morning for this forum. I hope that I can earn your vote to continue to represent you in Olympia for 4 more years in the state Senate. Solving problems for my community, listening to constituents, and finding ways to help their lives along the way is a great honor. It's something I get a lot of satisfaction from personally. I want to be able to continue to use my experience and relationships in Olympia to serve the people of the 38th Legislative District and to continue to work on unsolved and unfinished issues. There are no doubt that there are many issues in our community that continue to need to be addressed, and I hope that I will be able to work for you as we work towards solutions. Thank you.
Bernard Moody.
Hi, thank you for being and listening and being as patient as you have been. If we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. That's the only way to look at it. And I, I'm, not to just be disparaging to any of the leaders up here that are, doing the best that they can. I'm not a career politician. I didn't get groomed, to get the right jobs in order to build that ladder to lead me into the legislature. I'm just a person. I come from the people, hopefully to be a member of the chamber of the people, governing for the people. And right is right, wrong is wrong. And I ask that you help me to right the wrongs that we've been given for the last decade or two by the party that's in power now, that we have to lay whatever problems and disagreements we have down at their feet because they've been in power. And just like if we were in power, they would be telling us that it's time for us to go too.
On behalf of the Marysville Tulalip Chamber of Commerce and its members, I want to thank each one of you tremendously for showing up and engaging with us on these topics. Your willingness to appear this morning and speak frankly with us and not hiding behind politics or rhetoric shows the caliber of our choices for representatives, and it displays to us the character and thought that you've all put into your candidacies, and we appreciate you. Our goal today was to present a fair and impartial format that will aid citizens and business community in their decision-making process. Your vote is extremely important. Weigh your choices carefully, and please remember to vote before November 8th. I'm going to ask Yvonne to come up and wrap us up.
Yes, let's give them all a big round of applause. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you. Couple of quick reminders. You will see the chamber flyers are up there. 2 big events coming up. October 6th is our Mega Mixer at the Opera House. And December 1st is our big auction here at Tulalip. We are taking donations, sponsorships, and registration is open now. So if you are interested in getting a table or tickets, see Ann or I. Thank you to all our candidates. Best of luck to all of you. To our Government and Affairs Committee for their work on behalf of the Chamber and businesses in the Marysville Tulalip area. To 564IT for the video and getting it on the Chamber YouTube channel. To our moderator, Peter Rudolph. To today's sponsor, Handyman, And to Tulalip Resort, thank you for the amazing breakfast and the bacon. And a big thank you to all of you for being here today. Please have a great weekend, and I will see you all soon.